Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Staci Pomeroy. I lead the physical science section of Vermont Rivers program. I'm going to give you a brief introduction this morning around some of the geomorphology site assessment, really looking at it from the remote sensing side of things, ways to provide background information for your projects. And Jesus will introduce himself. He's going to kind of pick up and carry through some of the design considerations and engineering considerations. Aha! This is something that we use in our Tier 3 river and roads trainings. I brought it in today because it is a nice way to really start to set the context for your design and your project. So really thinking about some of our independent variables, the things that we can learn from our assessment work, and then the things that during our design are dependent on those assessments and the information that we get. So oftentimes, you know, in our river and roads trainings, we talk about this type of information as often at the top. These are some of the easier things for you to get. And as we work down through the list, these tend to be more of the things that you need to dig into a little more. So kind of setting up yourself for getting the information you need for your project. There's also a whole bunch of other information that you can get about your site and information upstream and downstream. Many times with our projects, we get focused on our project site. But as Laura said, our site is connected through a river system. And we really need to understand what's happening upstream of our site when we're doing the project, as well as what things are going to be happening downstream, because it is a connected project. So understanding things at your site and upstream and downstream of them is also important. And where can we get all this information? It's also important to understand what are the constraints at your site. So some of the things like utility lines, power lines, landowners. Laura kind of went through some of these things, but starting to really identify the overall project and the things that are going to influence the feasibility of that project and the issues that you may have that you're going to need to work through when you do that project. Many of you here are familiar with the A&R Atlas. This is an amazing resource for starting to get through some of the initial background information. So we'll look at a few things on the Atlas that can be really helpful. Go back. I can go back. There's a back. There's a back. There's a back. One more. All right. Sorry. We're lucky in Vermont that we have a lot of stream geomorphic assessment information. And some of it may be older, but it is still very good baseline information. And it also has a lot of information about where there's dams, barriers, other things in the system, both upstream and at your site, that can be really helpful. There are great summary reports for each of the reaches that have that assessment information on them. And it can give you a lot of detail and context for the area. This is Smuggler's Notch, where we're looking at a dam removal site currently. There's actually 4 projects in the Brewster River that are being looked at. So the assessment information was used to kind of help prioritize, understand how the site fits in context with the rest of the river. And I know it can go forward. Aha! There is also the geomorphic assessment reports. So each time we do a phase 1 or a phase 2, there is information that can be found in those reports. That's a good way to know at your site and upstream and downstream. On the Atlas, there's a lot of information. The timing did not get shut off, sorry. All right. On the Atlas, there's a lot of information about stormwater. And where you're thinking about sediment inputs. So the Smuggler's Dam, right at the entrance to the Smuggler's Notch area, has a lot of stormwater that drains into that. We also have a lot of sediment sources through the ditches that come into those areas. And when we think about removing this, we need to think about those connections too. Are there things that we're going to have to mitigate so that we're not bringing in extra pollutants or extra sediment? Or is it material that, as we release it downstream, is going to impact someplace else? So really thinking about where are your sediment sources, and where might there be other flows or impacts coming into your area that maybe you have to look at as part of your project, and are there things that you might have to address for those in that area? I have no idea why this is not going forward or backwards. All right, we also have on the atlas information about impaired streams. So in Smuggler's Notch, this has a lot of iron. So when we remove this dam, are we still dealing with iron that may impact downstream areas or other areas? How is the impairment that is on this stream going to be affected by the removal? Will it improve that impairment? So we can look at that kind of information. We also have water quality monitoring sites, so fish, habitat, and chemistry. Aha. And there's information about that monitoring data on our ISWISP database, and that can give you information about when it was collected, some of the concerns in chemistry, fisheries, bugs. So again, good context for what might be in the area and how your site removal might be affecting that monitoring information. Boop. Many of you are very familiar with our bridge and culvert assessment. Will Eldridge, I'm not sure if he's floating around in here. Yay! He did an amazing job working on getting the reports put out for our culverts information that is assessed, and helping provide our aquatic organism passage considerations, our geomorphic considerations, and the stream miles upstream that may be available. I didn't put in T&C's dam assessment that also gives you information about upstream, but these are a good way to kind of see, like, hey, if we remove this project, what might we get for areas upstream that are reconnected in those areas. Just a couple more things here as we work through this. There are some amazing, great resources now for historic topos. USGS and Esri has a good site that has several historic topos. It's a great way to see, like, hey, where did the river used to be? When maybe was the dam there? So we can see Morris Mill has been there for quite a while. And if there are immediate changes kind of with the location or river system. So historic information such as these topos can be really helpful. There's also more sites now with Vermont Geographic VCGI getting 1962 orthos. Many of them have been rectified, some have not yet. There's also a handful of 1942 imagery that's available. So again, good context for what do we see historically. Also, there is a lot more LiDAR being flown. So we have 2016, there's been a recent 2023. VCGI has released it in a draft form. With the LiDARs have been 1-foot contours. What we have been kind of working on in some of our, in the rivers program recently with some of the floods is there's been local LiDAR flown. We've been able to use VCGI's LiDAR and the local LiDAR that's been flown to kind of see what changes in the landscape have happened, how much land suddenly disappeared, or where did the river move. So it's a really valuable way to kind of help also understand sediment sources that might be coming from you upstream, as well as maybe changes in the river system that have occurred during floods. The 1-foot contours can also be really helpful if you're only able to survey on your site. The 1-foot contours that the LiDAR provides can help you look at information upstream and downstream of your site. And that is it. So I did a whirlwind, but we're going to turn it over to Jesus, and he's going to continue the engineering considerations. Oh, there was one more slide. FFI tool, did not come up, is our Functioning Floodplain Initiative tool. As we work towards phosphorus crediting, this is a resource for us to help look at what type of phosphorus may be achievable for those type of project removables. All right.
And before Staci hands the mic over to Jesus, does anybody have any questions for her on the presentation?
Many of you are very familiar with these things, but it's just a good setting you up.
Thank you, Staci. So let's talk a little bit about site assessments and things that we need to consider when we're doing a site assessment. My name is Jesus Morales first. I'm a fish passage engineer with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I've been doing this for 14 years. I do a lot of fishways. A lot of times I spent on FERC projects and regulatory projects like that, but I also do a lot of stream simulation, dam removals, a little bit of that. So I'm well versed on the topic, but I have other experts that I rely on when it comes to this. Hopefully I convey the right information for you today. Before we get into the things that you need to collect, field data collection and site assessment, I want to talk about a term that is actually recently introduced to me, and now I start every conversation, every presentation with it. It's the shifting baseline syndrome. And I think it goes really well with what Laura was saying earlier today. And what it is basically is a psychological and sociological phenomenon whereby each new human generation accepts as natural or normal the situation in which it was raised. What does that mean? Well, it occurs when generation after generation starts forgetting what the previous generation felt and had. The most obvious one is fish stocks, for example. We keep setting goals that are probably not in line with what it was 1,000 years ago. We keep moving that goalpost, and that's how I envision or define shifting baseline syndrome, is just keep continuing to move the goalpost, and every time we progressively have less insufficient restoration targets. And so it's important as we conservationists, as we do the work, that we know what this could be. And when it comes bringing it back to what we're doing today here, this is a great paper, 2008, Walter and Merritt's. They studied, I think, 16 rivers across along the eastern coast. And the conclusion was basically that all of them were raised over probably 500 years. So before Europeans got here, what they concluded was that a lot of the rivers in the eastern coast did not look like what they look today. That it was a lot of braided, interconnected with the floodplains, complex systems. This whole single meander channel is really not a natural condition, and it's probably was caused by hundreds of years of Europeans manipulating the rivers, damming up, and then building towns and whatever on top of those new terraces. So this is a good representation of what I'm talking about. 2,000 years ago, the river was down there. All of a sudden, you have all this legacy fill happening on top of your natural system. Imagine a town, a church, a thing on top of that. All of a sudden, you harden the terraces. The river completely disconnects from the floodplain. It gets entrenched like that. And so this whole idea of, the 2-year flood event, the bankful dimensions, that's what we need to go. Whoever tells you and whoever claims to be a purist on river restoration and stream simulation, let them know that we are all living in the spectrum. We are all living in the gray zone. Be comfortable with it, but also recognize, and you already saw that image, but you didn't see this one next to it. Recognize that when you have the ability, when you have the real estate, that you should try and accomplish more than that single meander channel, that you want to reconnect it. And so Laura set it up really well for us. The situation is that a lot of times you get roads, you get, again, as towns, and unless you have a government willing to do eminent domain for river restoration, you're not going to get away from that. So understand that we are absolutely living in the gray zone, that we constantly work on have restorations, and that is almost impossible in many ways to go back to natural conditions. But when you can, and when you have the real estate, please keep that in mind and make sure that you add. And there's plenty of examples on how to do that, how to reconnect it, how to create intermittent wetlands that gets replenished with floods. So there's ways to do it. Just know that, you know, that single meander channel is not necessarily the original and natural way of doing business, okay? So that said, let's keep going with what stream simulation is. In our opinion, Fisherman's Service and my colleagues, we see every restoration project, every aquatic connectivity project into two bins. It's either a stream simulation methodology or you're doing a hydraulic design methodology. You know, in stream simulation, you're really asking the river what it wants to be. You're asking the questions what it was, and you're trying to recover that, all those good features, right? So all your geomorphological features that the river wants to be, you're gonna get full ecological lift, you're gonna get aquatic passage, organism passage for native species, you get free sediment and nutrient movement, and all the good stuff. When it comes to hydraulic design methodology, you really are choosing a fish passage or a fish species to pass. And so I live in this is mostly what I do. I go to this door all the time, I'm passing fish on situations and projects where we cannot recover the stream as it was. Please understand that, you know, here you have the Neo fishways, pool and weirs, vertical slots, nature-like fishways go absolutely here. So when you are writing your contract, when you are setting the standards or the expectation for your project, make sure that you know which door you want to go in. AOP and saying like, I want AOP. AOP is a big umbrella. Passing a few fish, that's AOP. You know, if I'm passing Atlantic salmon is an aquatic organism and it's passing, therefore AOP. So for me, it's important, it's better for me to say, okay, if you're writing the contract and the expectation, is it a stream simulation project that I'm expecting and I want, or is it a aquatic passage for a particular species that I'm looking for? I'm not gonna talk about hydraulic design methodology today. I'm gonna go into a stream simulation today, and again, we're gonna talk about a little about the site assessments and things that you need to do. So what is stream simulation? In short, is a way, or by the way, stream simulation, AKA stream bed simulation, AKA geomorphic analog design methodology. All of them do the same thing, and you'll later on I'll give you a little bit of guidelines and resources. Different people call it different things. Basically the same thing. We're asking the river what it was, what it wants to be, what is natural condition and the more stable condition that it needs to be. And so you are looking for replacing the impacted part of your stream with some mimicking geomorphological reference data from a represented section, i.e. a reference reach. So it's important that you understand that that's the goal of the stream simulation. It's really finding the natural condition of the stream, the stable condition of the stream, copy pasting it throughout your impacted reach. The benefits of this is you're not selecting. So again, fish selectivity in the HDM is inevitable. You're always going to get fish selectivity when you are building a fishway or a hydraulic design methodology. Here you are allowing all native species to move. Why do we care about this? Why we want this? You gotta remember that the migratory fish species, like anadromous species that we all spend a lot of money on, they're in and out of the river short amount of times. There's a lot of native species that spend the whole year in the river. There's potamadromous species that also need to move upstream and downstream and through the habitat. There's amphibious species that also need to move in and out from the estuary. A lot of these are very small, spotty fish. They wait for low flows and warm water to move up or down the system, and they carry lochidia. And lochidia means water quality. So maybe I don't have a lot of fish heads here. Maybe it's a lot of engineers. It's fine if you don't care about fish for fish's sake. You do care about water quality. Everyone wants to live in a watershed with clean water. You want your kids to go into the stream and swim. You want it to smell right. If you've never seen a stream with a mussel bed underneath. You haven't seen beautiful because it's the most beautiful thing. It's very clear and it's very nice. So it's important that we convey this to people as a goal. Hey, it's all about water quality too. It's not just fish passage for fish passage sake. Sorry. So, back to the idea, we live in the spectrum. You know, there's many ways that we can go up and down in this scale. But at the end of the day, we are trying to let the stream be the stream, and really we wanted to ask questions. So for that sake, how do we add this question? This is the standard process for stream simulation design from the U.S. Forest Service document. Today, the rest of the day, we're going to talk about site assessments, part of it. They do a 5-day training on all this. Obviously, we don't have that time, so I'm gonna give you a little bit of taste for that site assessment and highlight some of the things that I think are most important in this. Man. So, when I go to do a site assessment, I want to treat it as a forensic analysis. You know, there was a crime here. The stream got injured by some anthropogenic impact. I want you to treat it like that. What happened? Who did it? Why did it? Okay. And so I want you to treat site assessment as a forensic analysis and really figure out what is it that went wrong. So let's go into the site assessment. I split it up in these particular topics. It's my choice. There's different ways of looking at it, but Staci set it up really nice for me. The whole different databases on historic mapping and understanding what happened is super important. When you go to a stream, you want to know what happened. Has it ever been channelized? Have it ever been dredged? Was it moved from one place to another, and then where the natural stream used to be, you have now a building there, a dam or a mill house or whatever. So it's important for you to understand the history of your project before you go out. This is remote. A lot of this work can be done remotely before you go out to the site. So really cool stuff that now, especially new technology that we can utilize here. Watershed context. Okay, so StreamSmart is a really good tool if you never used it. Make sure that you have it as long as you get your longitudinal profile, your latitude and longitude. You can go in and check it out. You know, see how big of a watershed it is. Get a sense of what are we talking about here. You can get drainage area. You can get stream backflow flows and dimensions. And if you never heard the word bankflow, what it means is really channel forming flows. That's what it is. It tends to be people say 2-year flood event. It correlates with bankflow flows. Some people 1.5. At the end of the day, you're going to ground truth it with information that you gather from the site. But this information is important to have in your hands before. Sometimes there's other local regressional curves that you can see how well or get some information on what it is. Is there a stream gauge in your site? Clearly, you want to go and look that up and see if you can develop a flow duration curve. And understanding where you at, where in the watershed you at, where geographically you're located, inside the watershed, in what part of that watershed you are. Are you in the headwaters, the transfer zone? Are you in the depositional area? Is your tailwater affected by tidal or a main stem river? That's important to know. Obviously, your depositional area, you're going to expect some more sandy, flatter slopes. You're in the headwaters, a lot steeper, less sand, more boulders, and everything in between. Know your site before you go out. Get information about where exactly you are in the watershed. Now, we did that on the computer, fine. Now let's go to the site. Let's collect some data. Most of the next information comes from the Bible, Stream Simulation Bible, first service in 2008. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it. And the famous cross-section, immediately you get your bankful width, you get your bankful depths, and from the stream stand, you think you're good, you're done. Cross-section area, get as detailed as possible, as many as possible in your site, through your site, and beyond the impacted reach. There's a few other things that, again, you can find in the Bible. Channel alignment, understand, find, figure out if there is being a forced bend to the river. Any point, characteristics of that will be, something like that, where you have a sand deposition here and a weird bend, hard bend. You can look at the historic map and see if, hey, does that make sense with what we're doing here? Stream bed material composition, what are we talking again? Does it match to what I thought we were in the watershed? Is there something weird about it, or do I need to reconsider my project? Channel stability, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but clearly, some geotechnical information. Is my stream in a transitional part in the evolution? This is you've probably seen this, the evolution of the channel. Is it in transition? Is it transitioning to something else, or is it stable? And floodplain conveyance, and again, go back to floodplain connectivity. Did I lose that? Do I want to regain it? Do I have enough space to regain it? But what I want to highlight today, because I don't have too much time, I want to highlight the longitudinal profile. For me, and I think the U.S. Forest Service even in 2008 understood this is the most important tool in your stream simulation design toolbox. This is where the project gets made or broken, okay? So please spend most of your time making sure that your longitudinal profile is correct. And so a lot of people are surprised, but really the recommendation, the bare minimum recommendation is 40 times the bankful width. So you get your bankful width, and you quickly know how long my profile should be. Now, you can convince me that you can do it less than that, because I already captured the full extent of my impacted reach. That's fine, but if you're not sure of that, please make sure that you go beyond what you expect. So you want to make sure that you capture the extent of the impacted reach and go beyond that and understand the processes. Why? Well, you want to make it as detailed as possible. You want to make sure that you get natural slope. You want to make sure you get depth and variability of scar pools. Does it change do you have consistency in those pools? Did it change inside your impacted reach or not? Grade controls, what kind of grade controls are? Make sure that you actually point them out. You have bedrock, you have tributary, maybe you have a log jam somewhere in the site. Note it. Make sure that you note it, take photos of them, and understand this. Dimensions, obviously you go back to bankful widths, the length of pools. Is it riffles or is it steps? What am I looking at here? And does it change? Does it vary downstream to the upstream? Is this different in the impacted reach or not? In this case, you want to make sure that you were able to diagnose the problem back to the forensic analysis. What happened here? You want to be able to answer this question. In which one of those you think your site is affected by? Okay, so make sure that you put as much attention and detail into this process. It will make things easier and better and just clearer as you move your design forward. And one of the biggest reasons why I like to make sure that I have really detailed longitudinal profiles and long enough, one of the biggest reasons is I want to make sure that I'm not in an actively incised channel. An actively incised channel is a river or stream channel that has eroded deeply into his bed. This process creates a channel that is significantly deeper than the surrounding floodplain, basically completely disconnect from the floodplain. You can see, I guess, stage 2 will be something like this. Incision move upwards. So it moves upstream until it meets a nick point. Nick points can be natural, natural waterfalls are nick points, but it could also be anthropogenic. For example, these are some examples of nick points that basically the designer did not know that there was an actively incised channel downstream. They set the fishway. That fishway was probably backwater. That culvert was probably not that high. But years after, because they didn't realize that there was an incised channel downstream, you get these situations where the bankful or the channel downstream completely moves down and disconnects from your passage route. And so it's important for you to know and to be confident and say, is there an incised channel or is not an incised channel? So why is that? Because honestly, if you don't do a good longitudinal profile and you don't get a good amount of information, it's easy to mistake a localized scour, which is what we are used to in a place where you don't have an incised channel and you have a undersized culvert, you're gonna have a local scour. They look very similar. They look very similar if you don't go beyond the impacted reach. So if you only are taking 4 or 5 shots in the river, 50 on the road, and just 4 or 5 shots in the river, and you're just giving me a 5% slope in the Vermont, and it looks like a line with no pools, no nothing like that, or just wiggly lines, I'll be concerned. I'll be concerned that, hey, we don't know, we cannot answer this question whether you are actively inside channel or not. And so for me, going at it without having a very clear understanding of what's happening downstream, it's a risk, it's a high risk. And something like the other examples could happen. This is a very extreme situation. This is California, but